So much fake news about East Palestine, Ohio right now. Is the water safe? Is the air safe? Is the soil safe? Who is actually answering these questions? Well, we found out this week that the train company that's responsible for this toxic explosion did all the testing and told everyone it was A-OK to head back into their houses. Well, that seems a little insane. Is there another party to back them up? But the train company and the government seems to be working hand in glove in order to cover this thing up, and it's maddening. What are the right answers? Well, we have to look to experts for those kind of things. You have to help out in every way that you possibly can. Donald Trump, of course, was there just to provide hope and light for these people this week. We went there, actually, ourselves to just do what we could to provide some hope for these people, to provide a light in a dark world. But we're not scientists. We're not environmental experts. And so the real question of whether this city is safe to live in, to raise your children in, to drink the water from, the tap, that really falls to someone else. That falls to experts that will be joining us right now. Tammy Clark and Kristen Meghan Kelly, an environmental health and safety professional, an industrial hygienist, and environmental specialist, join the show now. Tammy and Kristen, thank you so much for being on the program. Maybe you can answer some much needed questions for us, which is off the top. Is East Palestine, Ohio safe for human inhabitants right now?
No. And the reason that we say that is because I worked for the federal government for 12 years, 9 on active duty in the Air Force. You always treat a hazard as IDLH. That means immediately dangerous to life and health until you have the adequate sampling data, not just a one and done, to show that all forms of hazards, inhalation, absorption, and contact is at a safe limit. So until those test results are done appropriately, you have to treat it as a worst case scenario. So no, people should not be there.
I was like a human test swab when my team and I went to East Palestine, Ohio. Most reporters haven't gone. We went. My throat was burning. My eyes were burning. My ears were burning. We developed a cough, myself and my cameraman, after leaving just a few hours on the ground. These people have been living inside of this toxic cloud, which was, by the way, Pete Buttigieg just called it a toxic cloud seconds ago. Ooh. So everyone's in agreement that they nuked the town with toxic chemicals. We felt it ourselves. What were we feeling? With your professional expertise, what was happening to us and what's happening to the people of East Palestine, Ohio right now?
Well, that's a reaction from the different forms of exposure. So you were inhaling, you were exposed to inhalation hazards of not only the vinyl chloride, but we know that there were 45 different chemicals on this particular train. So when they did this controlled, it was really an controlled burn, and we'll explain that in a minute. But you were directly exposed to inhalation hazards, and different chemicals, of course, cause different reactions, and there are different forms of interaction with our bodies. So you can inhale, you can absorb, you can ingest, but you guys were directly inhaling that plume from the recently burned toxic makeup of several different chemicals. So you should have consulted with us. We could have helped you with your PPE.
Yeah.
Probably should have. So this wasn't a controlled burn.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. I'll let you explain that.
So my background, I worked in bioenvironmental engineering in the Air Force. And when you are dealing with, the burn pits that you probably heard about, that was my career field that exposed that. So there's a difference between just willfully, improperly getting rid of hazardous waste and burning it. And then there's hazardous waste disposal companies that come in and they do proper burns. It's controlled, meaning they control the amount of oxygen because it deals with the reaction without getting too technical. It's controlled, so they know how to control the release. And this situation, we don't know until we get the after action report, and we can't Monday morning quarterback. But I can understand why they did it the way that they did if they did not have time to properly do a controlled burn. So what they did is they punctured and drained it down into a trench, and the weather conditions was good that day to make the plume go upward instead of it exploding and going outward with shrapnel into the breathing zone. But until we get that after action report, we won't understand why that decision was made. We can just say that we know conditions in which that would be done. But in a real world situation, say an abandoned railed car or an underground storage tank, there's a way to properly do it to where it's not releasing the same hazard into the atmosphere.
Well, and let me just add to that real quickly. The reason that they would have maybe felt that they had to burn instead of just, allow it to just sit there was because the internal pressure or the temperature could have been building to the point where it could have caused an explosion. And that would have been fatal for the townspeople.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, nobody wanted this situation. This is a bad situation to be in. Everyone's aware of that. But what bad is happening to the townspeople right now? If you were in charge, what would you be telling them? Would you be evacuating?
I
Yes.
would evacuate them. And we have something called the ERG, the Emergency Response Guide, NIOSH Pocket Guide. That stands for the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, because this is more of an occupational exposure. This is where we see these incidences. But we basically have these go-to quick grab guides, and it will tell you how big of a cordon or an evacuation zone you need to do based on the hazard. So we had a chemical hazard, and then we had an explosion hazard. So one, I would still let everyone evacuate. I would have declared a disaster so that we had FEMA, Red Cross, all the government support that Ukraine is getting, and it would be given to those people in East Palestine, and they would be housed at least 100 to 150 miles in the opposite direction of the hazard. So there's upwind and downwind exposure. So they would also be told before the burn. They got 5 minutes through a text message notification to say, we're doing a burn, and then shelter in place.
No.
But
I'm
didn't
sorry.
tell
Can I
them-
stop you? You're
Right,
joking.
Yes. Yes.
no,
we
I saw
have-
the text from Courtney Miller. You may have seen her on Tucker Carlson as the
Yes.
woman who threw the rock into the river.
They had 5 minutes notice before they were going to do this burn, which is really a very egregious and inappropriate response by the EPA, because they did not provide the people with enough time to shelter in place. I mean, think about it. Moms pushing strollers down the sidewalks, people playing with their dogs in the dog park, kids at school, grocery shopping. You don't have enough time in 5 minutes to get back home. And then they were told to shelter in place, but they were not told how to shelter in place. So all of the contaminants that were released through this burn with multiple chemicals are now inside of everyone's homes on every surface,
And the
settled into
HVAC.
the floors, because the HVAC systems were not turned off. They should have been told, turn off your HVAC system, turn off your furnace, tape and seal doors and windows, and cover vents. But they were not told anything. And so there was no point in them being in their homes, because everything that was released outdoors has been pulled indoors. And so these people were not only exposed to the acute exposure, which is that immediate, massive exposure all at once. That's called an acute exposure, but they are now being exposed repeatedly with a chronic exposure long term. So this is an area that needs to be completely evacuated still.
And
incredible.
I just want to point out that one of our colleagues, Stephen Petty, people may have seen his viral video. He's in the red beanie. He's the GOAT of our profession. I'll just say that. So
Yeah.
he's down there doing the proper sampling. And in an occupational setting, whether it's the EPA or OSHA coming into a business we're embedded in or contracted for, if they come in to inspect us, every round of sampling they do, we have to do the same sampling side by side, because they have a track record of finding things they want to find and ignoring things they want to ignore. So the EPA had turned their eye and let this, I think it's HEPACO, the railroad, their contractor, they can test to get the results they want, which is why they did instantaneous readings instead of calculating what we call a time-weighted average. So it's exposure over time when the same contaminants share the same hazard to the target organ. So just think you have 10 chemicals that are volatile organic compounds, and all 10 of them attack the liver. That's called synergistic toxicity or cumulative dose.
So you're saying that the longer that they keep people here in this toxic dump, that the greater the probability, the multiplication tables just increase exponentially for some
Absolutely.
to have a terrible
Absolutely.
outcome.
Yes, absolutely. These people should leave immediately if they're
Wow.
able to, because they don't know how to properly decontaminate their homes. And just the process of decontaminating their homes, now that we know all these chemicals are inside of every home and every business because they were not properly sealed off, every time they walk on the carpets, they let babies crawl on the carpets. They're just re-aerosolizing and recontaminating the breathing air. And so these people are being exposed continuously every day. It wasn't just that one acute exposure from the burn. It's a continuous exposure now because the government told them it was okay for them to come back in. And so they need to leave. They need to completely leave because their homes have not been properly decontaminated.
And they're walking outside and they're bringing it into their homes. And that's why I always tell people when I do hazardous materials training, treat the contaminant like blood. So envision that everything around you has blood on it and then treat it that way. So if you wear your shoes outside, you got to leave them at the door. And no one is being given this proper risk communication. And that's the real crime.
Right. It's mass criminal negligence. And we know that the EPA knows it because they've trained us.
Mm-hmm.
So having gone there and having seen the people that are most affected, and I suppose the radius for this is probably miles, perhaps. I wouldn't actually know, but seeing the people right next to the burn, which is where we went, those people don't have the capacity to put themselves up in a hotel for months.
No,
right.
But
it's a non-scientific question, but it's. I mean, if their homes are contaminated, what you're telling me is that they've effectively neutralized any value in these people's houses.
Absolutely. And if we can bring hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants across the border, shelter them, put them up, feed them, clothe them, send them to college for free, for crying out loud. I don't get that treatment as a citizen. There is no reason we cannot take a very small town of those people who are in that burn area and downwind and move them to an area where we can put them in hotels, provide food and clothing and shelter. There's absolutely no reason the federal government cannot do this when we treat citizens of other countries better.
Yeah, that or Afghan refugees. I mean, the Afghan refugees are being treated better than these people in East Palestine.
Yes.
So, okay, so, I mean, when are we going to have to find this out? When they start keeling over of cancer, of liver cancer? I mean, what is the recourse here? Pete Buttigieg is there today. If Pete Buttigieg was live streamed into this show, what would you tell him?
Well, I would say resign.
Yes.
And I also believe that the residents, like I've said, they need to take their HVAC filters, if they still have them, from the first 5 days after that burn, and cut up corners, like outside corners, and in the middle, put them in a baggie, or take the whole thing and put it in a trash bag, tie it up, save it for later. You can't necessarily use that in litigation because it has to have chain of custody, but if you can, start on your phones or whatever paper you have, start documenting your symptoms. Even if it's just a headache, say like, on this day, a headache, how long it lasted, shortness of breath, my eyes were burning. People need to document this, because what they do is they look at an average, they look at trends in the area, and that's how you get dosed. Because remember, the burden of proof is not on the people. The sampling should have been done correctly right away. We're talking, it's been 20 days now?
3 weeks.
Yes. Yeah. So had they done the testing, they could have done an emergent turnaround time with the lab within 4 to 5 business days, got the data back to say you can go back, and then hired through bids of non-governmental hazardous waste cleanup crews, because you're going to get the best outcome. And they could have deconned the homes, and they could have returned. Right. And now our colleague, Stephen Petty, certified industrial hygienist, chemical engineer, he's doing those samplings right now. He lives in Ohio and in Florida, so he was ready to go.
Wow. Okay. So what is a Superfund site? This is a term that I've learned quite recently. And would this apply to East Palestine, Ohio?
Yeah, so Superfund site, there's something before that called the Nationals Priority Listing. It's where hazardous assessments are conducted to figure if there's just so much contamination of land, just to kind of dumb it down. If a site is so contaminated, it's certain federal funds and through court action, funds from the guilty parties are designed to clean up this area. And it can take a very long time to clean up a Superfund site. And sometimes, like abandoned military installations have Superfund sites from underground storage tanks leaking. The government can seize that property. It just depends if it's has restoration capabilities or not. But Superfund sites happen all around the world. Most of the time you see them with oil spills or radiological exposures. But it's something that I think that needs to really be looked at, because these poor people have completely lost their home values.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this entire town, I mean, you would just cordon off this entire city.
Yeah, it should be uninhabitable right now.
Wow. Wow.
And it's going to get worse before it gets better, because it's going to continue to leach down into the soil.
Yeah.
And the wells.
It sounds apocalyptic, and we don't try. We're not trying to be alarmist. We're not. And I probably wouldn't care so much if we hadn't physically gone there ourselves. But what is the what in the worst possible scenario is happening right now in slow motion that could be affecting these people?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's the long-term chronic exposure that they're being exposed to in their homes. And we know this is going to lead to cancers, neurological and degenerative diseases. And pregnant women are a big concern for us. We know because we know that this affects, it's mutagenic. These are mutagenic and teratogenic. Because of the synergistic toxicity, we know that this is going to cause long-term damage, and it could possibly cause miscarriages and birth defects.
Wow. So what is the recourse to try and get this information out? I mean, we're obviously covering it here, but there are people that are still living there, and nobody seems to be acting with the kind of urgency that the two of you are. And it sounds like your colleague, I've seen that video. Yeah. It's gone viral, your colleague in the red hat testing the water. So it sounds like we'll be getting some independent information soon. Is it just
and we can come back on and provide you with updates, because the testing he's collecting is being done right now.
But what you can do now is go to wethepatriotsusa.org. I'm a volunteer and podcast host for that organization. We are suing the EPA to force them to do their jobs correctly.
Good. Well, Godspeed to you. We need a lot more of that. And thank you for actually caring about these people. They're truly forgotten people, and it's very, very sad, and they need our help.
It is.
Well, thank you for providing a platform, because this information is something that the EPA does not want to get out.
Yes. Yeah. And thank you for having us to help us get this information out and share what the government will not share.
Yes. Yes. Of course. That's speaking truth to power, not power to truth, right? What the corporate press do all day. Thank you again for all of your assistance here, Tammy and Kristen.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Tammy Clark and Kristen Meghan Kelly, industrial hygienists and environmental specialists. They are indeed some of the people that we should be listening to right now. Certainly should not be listening to the people who took 3 weeks to even show up today. And they say, get the hell out. We'll continue on this story. We feel like this information is very important, and probably more important than ever to have independent reporting and independent scientists looking clear-eyed at this. Ladies and gentlemen, we care for a single thing, our fellow countrymen, and for the health and lives, clean air, clean water of the children of America, the people of America. That's the populist thing to do. It's also the moral thing to do. And so, shocking stuff. Scientists saying, get out right now of East Palestine. Ladies and gentlemen, share this video. My name is Benny Johnson. See ya. Thank you for watching. Our channel is here to meme the libs until they cry, and then to meme them crying. Their tears, they taste just like sweet, delicious ice cream. Salty, too. We ridicule the establishment and the libs because of you. Your support keeps us going. So if you like what you saw, please punch the subscribe button, click like, and ring the little bell so that you know when we're live. Don't you want to know when we're live? And make sure that you subscribe to our email list just in case the plug gets pulled, as tends to happen. If you want to see more of our videos, click here or here. My name is Benny Johnson. Stay free, Base Patriots.